Where's Your Head At? A Brugmansia trip report by Datura, posted to earwid.org October 25th, 2003. Editor's note. The plant described is more likely to be Brugmansia and not Datura, as Datura rarely grows taller than a fence. Let me start by saying that you will notice that just about all people's experience with Datura are very common, and mine was no different. I live in Sydney, Australia, and I'm 20 years of age. I've tried a lot of different drugs and have never had one that I did not enjoy. But this was soon to change. My first experience with this nasty drug was only 2 weeks ago from the time of me writing this report, and it goes a little like this. I live with my father in the inner city suburbs, and at home on Saturday with no money and no plans for the night, my father comes home from walking the dog with his trumpet-shaped white flower, saying that he thinks it could be Datura. I go online to find some pictures of this elusive drug, and in no time have confirmation that it is very well indeed Datura itself. Now, for my part, I am very excited about this little discovery, and quickly ask where my father had found this stuff. But naturally, he does not want to tell me because of obvious reasons, and just said that I probably walk past it every day. Now, I catch a train to work, so I quickly went for a voyage up the station in search of a free high, and I found myself not being disappointed that halfway there in someone's front yard were 3 shrubs of this stuff, with the flowers hanging over the fence, just waiting to be plucked there from the stationary position. I take only one off the shrub. Upon arriving home, I tell my father that I found this little treat, and his response was simply, "Don't take that stuff with me around." But overexcited, and very much wanting to give it a shot, I measure a coffee mug of water into a pot, and throw in the flower I picked, and the one my father found right away, beginning to boil it in the water. I only boiled it for about 10 to 15 minutes using a potato masher to press down on the flour to extract all the goodness, and when the water was a nasty yellow, pissy looking colour, I decided that it should be suffice, being that my experience with mushrooms worked quite well with the same method, and I strained all the juice out of the flowers and poured it into the coffee mug. 2 tea bags, 3 large teaspoons of sugar, and a little milk should help erase the taste I knew was going to be bad from the smell. But it still tasted like crap, and I dry retched several times whilst downing this potent cup of tea. I sit down on the couch with my father at the computer and watch a little telly waiting for the onset of this drug, thinking it would take an hour or so. But within half an hour, I feel noticeably different, and decide that now was a good time to tell my father that I did take the drug, and not to worry too much if I start acting strange or talking rubbish. The come-on was much stronger than I thought it would be, and the first thing I feel is my eyelids weighing too much for me to be able to hold them open, and this uncontrollable urge to lay down and close my eyes for a bit. I normally get tired and yawny when I take harder drugs, so this was very normal to me. And so, I head for my room to lay down for a while till this stuff kicked in. The time I drank this stuff would have been around 7 PM, and I came back downstairs from a little rest that felt like 20 minutes at about 11 PM. If you have read other personal experiences on this stuff, you will see that everyone needed to use the bathroom quite often and had the worst case of cottonmouth in their lives. Mine, was no different from anyone else's. So after the most enjoyable visit to the bathroom I ever had, I ventured back downstairs to replenish my first. My father was still awake and could tell by the way I had to hold on to things to move around that was quite high, and I had to confirm to him that it was all going smoothly. I drank about 3 cups of water simultaneously and went out the front for a cigarette. I felt numb and heavy-headed, and at the same time floating in the clouds and lightheaded. It was unlike any other high I had experienced before. After finishing the cigarette, I came back inside to have another drink of water. I had a bit of a chat with my father, and he was constantly saying, "What are you talking about?" And my only reply was, "Well, I don't know." Now, the first scary thing to happen was when I needed a drink and came into the kitchen for this very reason. I picked up open a bottle of canola vegetable oil and had a good chug on it, 2 gulps, before realising it was cooking oil, and running out the front with the last gulp still in my mouth and throwing up all over the balcony, all in the presence of my father, who was obviously dumbfounded. After I had thrown up the oil, I needed a drink to get the taste out of my mouth, and I came back to the kitchen and picked up the same bottle of cooking oil, proceeding to lift it to my mouth for another swig, but realising by the look on my father's face as I was doing so, that I had made yet another blunder, and luckily pulled out before making the same mistake twice in a matter of 5 minutes. It was now about midnight, and my father decided to leave me alone and go to bed, for which I was grateful. The next few hours are blurry, and my memory is very poor, but I do remember watching an adult movie on the DVD-ROM drive of the computer, and what I will tell you next is probably the reason for me trying this stuff again. I couldn't take my eyes off the porn, and I was very much enjoying it. I must have watched the same movie 5 or 6 times, and the harder I watched it, the more it seemed that it was a personal show at a strip club or something. The girls in the movie were constantly looking at the camera, smiling, and waving for me to join in. I found myself looking behind me to see if there was anyone else in this strip club, and was naturally happy to find out that she was, in fact, doing this awesome show all for me. At times, it was like we were communicating through the computer, and she would wave for me to join in, and I had to explain that I couldn't get inside the screen for some reason. None of this was at all strange to me, and I was, in fact, having a really good time, as you would imagine. I think it was around 6 or 7 AM that I decided to venture upstairs to have a nap, and being that I was tired, I thought sleep would be easy, but boy was I wrong. Now, this was the most unbelievable sleep I have ever had, because the whole time I was unsure as to whether or not I was actually asleep. I would remember every detail of every dream and constantly wake up whilst finishing big sentences and wondering if my father could hear me talking in my sleep. One dream I had was of a cartoon, and I can remember making up every sentence of every character and feeling great about the fact that I had so much control over my dreams. This is way too hard to try and describe what I went through that night in my sleep, so I will leave it at that. Wow. Anyway, I woke up at around 2 PM Sunday and got out of bed feeling full of energy and still really scattery in the head. I had to tell my mates about this magical drug that grows in the old Greek lady's front yard. I instantly rang up my mate Dave and told him that there is something I want to show him, and he picked up that I was coming over to share some drugs with him, but he didn't know what. I went back up the street, and this time picked 7 flowers off the plant and went home and wrapped them in cling film wrap, and then proceeded to Dave's house at about 5 PM. "What the fuck is this stuff?" was the first thing Dave said after seeing a ball of green and white wrapped in cling wrap. "Well, it's Datura, bro. You gotta have a taste rod of this stuff." And Dave was happy to oblige. So, in the cooking pot with 7 little sins and 2 coffee cups of water, I was excited as Dave to do this stuff again, and so the same story as the previous night ensued. Boiled for 15 minutes, strained and drank with tea. Now, my first experience of this stuff had a heavy come-on with only the 2 of the flowers, and I had just given my mate Dave 3.5 flowers worth for his first time. So naturally, within half an hour, he was heavy as hell, and quickly on his way to that exact place. My come-on wasn't as bad because I had done it within 24 hours, and I was still high from the previous night. But Dave was still struggling. I told him to just lay down, close your eyes and ride it out. Dave has also had plenty of experience of drugs of all nature, And so, he did exactly what I said. We took the tea around 4 PM or so, and the plan was to stay indoors and listen to music and just basically chill the best we could. And we did exactly that. Now, my second time was even more patchy than my first time, and all conception of time was straight out the window. For the first few hours, all I remember was stumbling around Dave's apartment, running into walls and whatever I could find I would fall on, over, or into. For some reason, we both kept on dropping plates and cups, and I think by the end of the night we broke about 6 cups and 4 plates. Why we needed to pick up plates was beyond both of our grasp. All of this was just unfolding around 3 AM Monday morning, and we both had to work in a matter of hours. But this was not going to happen, and we knew it. I kept on running into walls and cupboards. I remember just walking straight into them knowing it was going to happen, but unable to stop myself from doing so. At one point, I headbutted a cupboard so hard it nearly broke my nose, and it actually still has a kink in it. But there was no stopping me doing it again. At some point of time in the early hours of the morning, I remember hearing a knock on the door, and it was another mate, Jake. Thing is, he had a group of people with him that I didn't know, and they all came inside and sat down in the living room and didn't say anything. Jake put his head between his legs and sat there in silence, and I thought that he was really drunk or something, so I left him be, continuing to walk around the apartment in a haze. After a while, I approached Jake and tried to make conversation with him, and when he finally looked up, I came to realise that it wasn't Jake at all, and I had never seen this guy before in my life. He just stared at me and didn't say anything at all. It kind of freaked me out a bit, but I guess it didn't really faze me in the moment. I was smoking imaginary cigarettes all night, and there's maybe now 6 people in the apartment I did not know. And Dave was not to be seen, but he was there the whole time as well. Every time I looked away, the strange people would disappear. I would walk into another room, and there they were again. This was completely normal to me. The silent people began to take on the form of mental patients. I believe because my subconscious thought I was going insane. And I was constantly making conversation with them, and they would talk back but no sound would come out, so I was trying to lip read. As the night wore on, the strange people would take on more horror-based figures, and it was turning into a complete nightmare. But you know what? I actually wasn't scared one bit. So much more happened, and I saw some really freaky stuff ensue. But I could go on and on about it, but it's pointless. When the heat finally subsided a bit, me and Dave started to communicate again. We were both dying for a smoke of marijuana, so we decided to call a drug dealer at 4 AM. Now, Dave works in market research, and when he rang the dealer, he started to introduce himself like he was calling a client, and the dealer was not impressed, as you would imagine. So, finally, I called a taxi to go home, and I got home just before the sunrise. I went straight to my room and went to bed. And sure enough, I had company in the form of mental patients laying on the floor beside my bed. By this time, I had my head together enough to know that I was hallucinating, but the mental patients were still with me. So I started to play around with this buzz a little by trying my hardest to produce new figures, in the form of sexy women naturally. And it actually worked, but I couldn't keep them there, and the mental patients were with me all night. At one point, I even asked them if they were hanging around because they fancied me, and sure enough, they nodded back. I will describe them to you the best I can. Now, there were only 2 of them when I got back to my place, and they were both female, and one of them was the exact same one I was talking to at Dave's place. One of them was just a pillow on the floor, so the head was big and square, and she constantly had a big smile on her face with an enormous mouth. The other one was the one from Dave's place, a clock that was smoking crack at the start of the night, and the rim of the clock was like braces for her face. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And so, I lay in bed for hours making conversation with my new friends, thinking to myself the whole time, am I fucking going insane? But the fact that they were not talking back kept me from believing so. I dreamt the same as the night before, with lovely colourful dreams, and somehow managed to call work and tell them that I won't be making it in. I have no memory of this, so naturally, when I called them the second time, my boss was already informed and asking why I had to tell him again. Now, I will tell you about the experience of the side effects, which weren't that bad at all considering. Well, first off, I couldn't read for a good 4 days, and this is the reason I had 2 days off work. I kept on getting little flashes of the trip, and if I rubbed my hands together, I could tell it felt like I did when I was high. My pupils were dilated for 2 days after the trip, and people would notice and comment on this, which is not a good feeling at all. So, as a result, I had to wear dark glasses everywhere I went.